Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's On the Sofa. Very privileged to have David Moss on with us tonight, and we'll be going over shortly with him and Vic. Just a couple of announcements. Membership for the OAC is open, so either renewals or new members. £5 for the season, and you will receive one of our fixture wall charts free if you are a member. And if we do have any left after, we will sell them. But to be certain of getting one, please join up. Also, SAS Travel put a tweet out today just to remind people that if you want your discount for travelling, you have to be an OSC member. So again, that's a reason to join. As we say, £5 for a season. So it's a bargain if you do travel a lot. Matchday draw subscriptions, so you can buy a subscription for the season for your matchday draws. So instead of picking one up at the ground, you can buy a number that takes you right through the season. So again, that's on the store. And I think that's it. I'm sure there was something else I had to say, but I will remember and I will say it at the end. So let's get Vic on. Hi, Vic.
Hi, Chris. How are you on this beautiful evening? What can I say? I mean, the sun is shining. It's gorgeous, isn't it? So there we go.
Best time of the day.
Yes. Flying Ant Day, probably.
Oh, really? Oh,
well,
no,
there will be about.
Yeah, I certainly haven't had any of those. I've had a very weird conversation on Twitter today about cheese and Marmite, as in sandwiches, crumpets, and things like that.
Yeah, I see Matt Haywood's favourite.
Yes. It was a bit bizarre, but yes, the things you speak about on Twitter.
Indeed, yes.
Right, let's get Mr. Moss on. Good evening.
Good evening, everybody.
Thank you very much for giving us the time for to attend this. It's brilliant. As I said to you before we come on air, a lot of people ask for certain players, and your name has come up numerous times. So,
Lovely.
Again, thank you very much for coming on.
That's nice as well. Thank you.
Right. So, anybody has any comments or questions, please leave them. We will get through as many as we can. As always, I do collate them at the end, and I will send them on to David if we don't have a chance to ask them. Okay, so I will leave you, and I will be back shortly.
Chris, thanks very much indeed. David Moss, it's a great pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us. And those of us of a certain age would have watched you play over your 9 years at the county ground and enjoyed every single minute. Should we go right back to the beginning then? You're born in Witney, which, as we know, is kind of the wrong county in a way. So your time at Swindon started in '69, which of course is a momentous year. So how did that all come about?
Well, I was playing for Witney Town. When I was 14, I started training with them. 14, I made my debut in the reserve team. 15, I made my debut in the first team. And then I was spotted by the great Maurice Owen from Swindon. And Maurice invited me, when I was 16, invited me up for a trial. And the trial went well. At the same time, I'd also been for a trial at the other place in Oxfordshire, you know.
Yeah, that one, yeah.
And they'd offered me a professional deal. And Mr. Green, who was the chairman at the time, I believe, or certainly one of the senior directors, Cecil Green, offered me a pro deal at Swindon. And as I'd grown up, although living in Oxfordshire, I'd grown up as a Swindon supporter. My dad used to take me from the age of 6 or 7, so there was only really one choice.
Good man. So you get the chance to, I mean, obviously Witney, you know, decent club, but then you get the chance to move up. How much of a difference did you find when you moved to the club that had just won the League Cup, basically? I mean, and on the up, promotion to Division 2, that kind of thing. How did you find it?
Massive change. I was all excited, as you can imagine, waiting to start pre-season training, which hit me like a bombshell. Pre-season training, I'd only ever trained like on a Tuesday or Thursday night with Witney Town. So my main fitness came from playing matches, playing for Witney, playing for the county, playing for the district. So I was playing every weekend, 2, 3, sometimes 4 matches over Saturday and Sunday. But the actual pre-season training at Swindon, wow, that was something to behold.
So what is I mean, famously, I know you went back under Lou Macari in later years, and famously he liked his players to run pre-season. I mean, what sort of pre-season training did you do at this time?
I'll be honest with you. For the first 2 weeks of my first pre-season, we didn't touch a football. We ran every morning. We had a cup of tea and sat around for an hour, and then different types of running in the afternoon, whether it was shuttle runs or running around the training ground at Shrivenham Road or cross-country runs. It was just a variation of runs, and that hit me. I must admit, hit me very hard.
Up the lawn a lot, then, I would imagine, up that hill.
Well, we were everywhere. Honestly, I can't remember where we. I know we used to go up, even where the horses train. Up on the gallops, up in Lambourne and out that way. So quite an experience for me.
How did your body react then? Because okay, it's one thing training, the non-league club, I'm sure, but then you do this. Your body has to adapt, doesn't it?
Hit me really hard. I really struggled for the first 2 or 3 weeks of pre-season. Got a little bit better when we started playing friendly matches or practice matches, and the balls came out in training. But we're going back to 1969, and that's how pre-season was in the early days. It was purely physical, and if you don't get a good pre-season, it won't see you through the season, which is what we were told. Now it's obviously more scientific, and but oh dear, in those days I was delighted when we started playing football.
I can imagine. But I guess your body became fit, and that was the big plus, was it?
Eventually, yeah. I did struggle for the first half a season at Swindon. I didn't feature in many reserve games. I don't think I played maybe 7 or 8. I played in the A team, and I was substitute for the reserves. I played a few reserve matches, but I didn't pull up any trees. I admit that. It was a bit of a slog for me the first season. I have to admit, and don't forget, going into that dressing room, albeit in the reserve dressing room, I was still training and mixing with my heroes.
Yeah, I was going to say,
John Trollope and people.
I was going to say that you probably were you at Wembley in '69?
No, but I was probably playing somewhere actually, because it's in March, isn't it? The League Cup final,
March the 15th. Yeah, but
so
even so, to suddenly be in the same dressing room as the likes of Joey Butler and John Trollope and Don Rogers and Roger Smart and people like that, that must have been quite a thing.
It was, because they were, I grew up, they were my heroes. I remember Don and John Trollope playing in the first team at 16 for Swindon. And I would have been, I don't know, say 7 or 8 years of age. So they were heroes to me. And suddenly I'm standing next to them, I'm training, I'm jogging next to them. It was quite a step up for me. And it was a bit of a shock.
I was going to say, you were a bit starstruck, were you, at the beginning? Yeah. And did you have to get over that? Because you have to get over that, I guess.
Yeah, I got over it. But I think it took me a while. Not naming names, but not everybody was friendly and welcoming. But the ones I've mentioned were. I mean, John and Don and people like that were fantastic. And Don was my big hero anyway.
Well, yeah.
But John Trollope was a great professional, and Joey Butler and people like that, Frank Burrows. So eventually, but when you go into a dressing room, wherever it is, you've got to win them over. You've got to show that you can actually play, that they can trust you to have the ball and things like that. So it was a tough first year, I think.
Because you made your debut, I think, as a sub against Norwich, December 71. Yeah. Your full debut came against Watford in April 72, 2-0 win. So suddenly, to get into the first team, what is that like? That moment when you're told, I guess it would have been Fred Ford, would it? Who would have given you your debut in those days?
No, it was Dave Mackay.
Oh, subsequent to that, right. So Dave Mackay, Scottish international, says to you, right, David, you're going to play in the first team. What's that like?
Well, I was very fortunate because Dave and his assistant, Des Anderson, took a shine to me in training, and my whole confidence changed when Dave became manager after Fred. Fred Ford was a very, very good coach and a very good manager, but his only real his priority was the first team and getting results. But Dave was a little bit more. He'd seen something in one or two of the younger players that he pushed forward towards the first team. So I was lucky in that respect that he took the job when he did, and he liked me and gave me a chance as a substitute. I had 3 or 4 games as a sub, and then he gave me my debut. So I've got a lot to thank Dave for.
So I've got questions coming in already.
Yeah.
So loads of them. This is from Craig. Did any other partnership in his career match that he had with John Trollope, the overlapping John Trollope, who of course was extraordinary at that and years ahead of his time in that particular part of the game? How was that partnership?
That was fantastic. John was absolutely he was an athlete, and they talk about, you hear it nowadays about attacking fullbacks. John was doing it 50 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Wasn't he?
Yeah.
And brilliant at it. And we had a great, and I know he did with Don as well, had a great understanding. So when I got into the first team, John used to just say to me, whenever you get the ball, I'll be coming up outside you. And I used to, John, you're not going to get the ball every time I get it, but I'll try and do my best. But we had a great understanding, and I felt it was really successful.
Yeah, many of us will remember that night against the team that you worked for, of course, Liverpool, in the League Cup, when John went on the overlap and put the ball in from across and gave Don Rogers the first goal in that famous 2-0 victory that night. And that sort of summed up John Trollope's game to me. I mean, I think he got injured on that night doing that, but it was extraordinary. And yeah, you're right. They talk about win-backs now, but he was so fit, wasn't it? Incredible.
Oh my word, he was so fit. He put me to shame. I mean, I was 17 when I signed pro, and John would have been, I suppose, 25, 26. But my goodness, he could run all day. He used to run past me on the overlap and run past me to get back into his position.
Incredible.
But brilliant. We had a great understanding and a great, I think we had a great mutual respect as well.
Martin says, would like to say good evening to Dave Moss. Some great memories back in the 70s. I've got a question for you later. This is from Chris. Could you tell us which Liverpool players you scouted and went on to play in the first team? I think I've got one name which I'll throw into the melting pot. We'll get to your Liverpool things a bit later on.
Yeah.
Malcolm says, Dave, you were like Don. You never got your shorts dirty. Is that true?
Well, I didn't need to in those days. If you had good balance and 2 feet, you could stand on your feet. But no, I don't agree really. I think like Don, you've got balance. You can skip past, especially in those days on the heavy pitches, you could skip past defenders diving in. So when I went out onto the pitch, it wasn't my ambition just to get dirty. I was trying to actually achieve something.
Yeah, of course. This was a period of great transition for Swindon Town, wasn't it? Because we've mentioned the great League Cup final team and promotion team was beginning to break up. Stan Harlan left when Dave Mackay came in, went off to Birmingham, things like that. How was the mood in the dressing room? Because let's face it, things went a little bit awry, didn't they? Yeah,
they did, yeah. If I'm perfectly honest, during that time, it probably wasn't the best dressing room. You still had, your mainstays, your John Trollopes and your Frank Burrows and Joe Butler. But yeah, there were a lot of different players coming in who probably, if I'm being honest, maybe weren't of the standard of the players they were replacing. So it was a difficult time, but I was like, I know what I want to do. I want to play for the first team, but I've got to prove myself. I wasn't anywhere near established. And if I was left out of the team, I accepted it and I played for the reserves. And if I was put on the bench, I was absolutely thrilled. But I would say that it probably wasn't the best for that 12, 18-month period.
You mentioned reserve games, which is something which is sadly lacking these days, isn't it? I mean, the football combination matches, you played against some top players in those games, didn't you? The likes of Arsenal, Tottenham, you could go on and on and on, and West Ham, people like that. And I guess those were really big learning games for you.
They were fantastic. I mean, you actually played on the main stadiums. So I'm 17 coming from Whitney Town and I'm playing at Highbury or White Hart Lane or Upton Park, you know. And if the players weren't in the first team or coming back from injury, they played in the reserves. So you had to learn. It was a great experience for me to play against international footballers, you know, and watching and learning and trying to get the better of them. But I find that sadly lacking nowadays.
Yeah.
You know, really, really lacking because of it was yes, we're playing against a lot of top players. You're getting the experience of playing on these, you know, first division pitches, etc. And you're pitting yourself against some real good players. Where nowadays, I find it a little bit less competitive when I'm watching these games, and it doesn't seem to matter quite as much. And you're playing against similar players of similar age. You're not coming up against 30-year-old internationals who are, you know, talking to you and telling you what they might do if you go past them or something. So I think it's a lot different nowadays.
Do you think that's something that football's got wrong somehow? I mean, I know finance plays a great deal of a part in this, particularly at lower league level. But, you know, as fans, I used to go and love watching the football combination games on a Saturday afternoon when the town were away or something, because you were guaranteed to see, you know, the likes of Pat Jennings when he was coming back from injury, people like that. So do you think that's something that football's got wrong a bit? I
think ever since the combination and the Northern League, I can't remember what, Central League, wasn't it? Or Northern Central League or something. Ever since those were abolished, then they've never got it quite right with reserve team football. And obviously the coming of the academies had a lot to do with that. So you got your under 18 players. Then they decided we need a kind of reserve team for some players to get experience. So they brought up the under 21s, which is now under 23s. But I see a lot of those games, and I'm not convinced that they're a real breeding ground for future first team players. I think the best thing they do, the players now, is go out on loan and play first team football.
Well, we see a lot of that, of course, at the county ground now.
Yeah.
So when did you feel part of a Swindon Town first team? When did you think, right, I'm here, I'm actually a part of the first team, as opposed to somebody trying to get into the first team?
I would say 72, 73. I think we had another change of manager. I think Les Allen came in.
Yeah.
And we did get relegated.
Yes.
So that was my first full season. But I also think it was Kenny Strouds, Jimmy Allen, maybe Dave Syret. I can't remember. There would have been 4 or 5 younger players like myself that were thrust into the first team, and it was probably too much. The second division at the time was probably too strong for us, and we had our moments, but we couldn't quite stay up. So that was my first real season, but I did learn from it, most definitely, because the third division was also a tough breeding ground.
Because you got off to a cracking start in that relegation season, if I remember right. You were top after about the first week. You got 5 out of 6 points because it was 2 points for a win in those days, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So you got off to a cracking start before it all went a bit sadly awry.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, that's the early season enthusiasm, I think, soon disappeared.
Yeah,
it became a tough season.
It was also the season when, of course, you had those black shorts. It didn't quite fit, did it? It was a wrong kit for Swindon, really. It was all a bit odd.
Definitely, yeah. I couldn't believe it, really.
Yeah,
when they did that, didn't seem quite normal, did it?
No, it certainly didn't. But we also saw the arrival of somebody in that season who, well, you will know quite well, I would imagine. Somebody who's been a guest on this before. Somebody called Peter Eastoe, who came on loan in January of that year, around about now, October it might have been actually. What a player that was.
Came from Wolves, yeah. Tremendous player, great goal scorer, had a fantastic career, but I think he had a great time on loan with us, and then somehow we managed to sign him full time, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
We signed him permanent.
Yeah.
So great business. And like I say, had a great career and went on and played Everton, QPR, and Lord knows where else. So yeah, great lad as well, Eastie.
Fantastic. Relegation follows then, another change of manager and the return of somebody called Danny Williams, who had been off to Sheffield Wednesday after the League Cup success, but he returns to the county ground. What was that like, the return of Danny?
Well, after relegation, I think it was a breath of fresh air. You know, Danny was a character. He was a real football man. People didn't give him credit for his football knowledge and his ability to spot talent. I think in his first spell, you know, the likes of Peter Noble and Joe Butler came in for peanuts, absolute peanuts. And look at the careers they had. So it lifted a cloud when Danny came back.
And it actually led to, well, let's go through some of these. I've got lots of questions coming in for you. Andy says, remember a 4-0 defeat at European champs Nottingham Forest. Sorry, Cloughie. In the cup, Peter Shilton had to produce 2 or 3 brilliant saves to keep out Moss's free kicks. Andy says, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. If Eastoe don't score, then Mossy must. You might remember that chant from the town end.
Yeah.
Paul says, love that era. My favourite, Moss, Syra, Anderson, et al. Yeah, and we're going to get onto that in a minute.
Yeah.
Sean says, David Moss, saw you in 76, fell in love with the town ever since. Remember 1978, Nottingham Forest in the cup when Clough was supreme. You scored, made my day. So lots of those coming in, which is lovely. Well, let's get on to the renaissance under Danny Williams then. And I'm going to tell you, I mentioned to you before, I mean, you got a hat trick against our favourite team. We should mention that, of course, in a pretty poor season for Swindon. So that came at Easter, I think, didn't it?
Yeah.
It's a 3-goal spell, which I think, you know, you remind people who were of a man of ground persuasion quite a lot, don't you?
I do, yeah. And it was, you know, it was a perfect hat trick. Right foot, left foot, and a header.
Yeah.
Which is, the header was rare for me, but I did get a few. So I do remind a few people, Oxford fans who I'm friends with, obviously. I did work there and enjoyed my time. In fact, I loved it there. So we had a bit of banter between us, but it's all good fun. Which probably it isn't nowadays, probably between the two sets of fans, I would think. But I think when you're on the staff side and you're working, whoever you're working for, you're doing your best for that club. It's like your job, isn't it?
Yeah,
you're doing wherever you work, you want to do your best. So that's the way it was. And as much as I loved my time at Swindon, I loved it at Oxford as well.
Yeah, it wasn't much fun on the terraces in those days, I can assure you, when those games take place. No. Right, let's get on to the 74-75 season. And I have to say, if you pin me against a wall, apart from 68-69 and a couple of other seasons, this is one of my favourite ever seasons. You know, when people talk about Moss, Anderson and Eastoe, Dave Surratt, people like that, you know, this was a great time to watch the town. And I still to this day am baffled how that team never won promotion. But I'm going to take you back to November of 1974 against Colchester United. Do you remember that game? You got a hat trick in it as well. November the 30th, 1974, Swindon 4, Colchester United 1. Let me reel off this team to you. Barron, Dixon, Trollope, Burrows, Prophet, Moss, McLaughlin, Eastoe, Butler, Anderson. Colchester included Mike Walker in goal, the former Norwich man. Ray Harford, he had a decent managerial career. And a former town man, Ray Bunkle, who, of course, was at the town when things weren't great.
Yeah.
Do you remember that game?
I do. I got 2 penalties.
Yeah.
Scored 2 penalties. We got a hat trick. And they were top of the league, Colchester, when they came.
Yeah.
I think we were like 4th or 5th.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, it was going to be a really tough game. And I think we were brilliant on the day. Pitch was very heavy. It was a grey November day. And it was probably one of the best performances of the season, I would say.
Yeah, all these years later, I still have it as one of my top 5 Swindon games. It's bizarre, isn't it, how you remember things like that? But what's it like playing in games like that?
It's what you want to do, really. You want to pit yourself in the best games. You want to do well individually, but you also want to do well for your team. You know, no individual, whoever scores the goals, you don't score the goals on your own. Somebody's helping you. somebody's creating. Then it was like myself. If I created a goal for somebody, I was delighted as well. So to score them, yeah, it's very special. But the team comes first, and it was days like that. You got to embrace them because they don't happen every week.
No. Can you understand why that team never went up?
Not really. No, we had the talent there. We definitely had the talent. Inconsistency, I don't really know. Maybe away from home we were a little bit fragile. I'm not sure what the statistics would say on that, but I think we had a fantastic home record, if I remember rightly. Difficult to pinpoint because, like you say, we had some very, very good players.
Yeah, Trevor Anderson, of course, who had this awful tag put upon him, the new George Best, because he came from Belfast, Northern Irish. But, you know, he played for Manchester United, came to Swindon, and I don't know, I didn't know him, but I guess he didn't come across as Billy Big Boy. Do you know what I mean? He came across as a player who wanted to play for Swindon. Is that fair to say? That's
fair. That is very fair. You know, when we knew that Trevor was signing, you didn't know what you're getting. Like you say, he was billed as the next George Best, and it very unfair on anybody. But Trevor came to Swindon, became just one of the lads, and mucked in, and I thought he was excellent player and excellent team player, as well as having individual flair and scored some smashing goals. But he was also a team player.
Yeah, there was that extraordinary game against Walsall towards the end of the season when Leicester Shapter gave all those penalties in it, and that was a bonkers game. Do you remember that one?
I think Trevor scored three penalties, didn't he?
He did. Yeah.
I think I won 2 of them, and I also scored in the game, but not a penalty.
No, because that was the rarity, because their goal was a penalty as well, if I remember right.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he felt sorry for them and gave them a penalty after giving us 3. I'm not sure.
Amazing. Right, more of these questions coming in. Dave, do you remember Alan Loddington, Tracy Digby's dad, always shouting out from the Shrivenham Road stand above everybody else? Hi, Dave. What's your views on where you find the club are these days? What level do you think we should be? What size of club and fan base? Dave, can you recommend any young Liverpool player to come to Swindon? We'll get onto that in a minute. We don't want to hear talk like that, Mossy. That's about that club from up the road, I think, that we're talking about there. And Sean said these days Colchester one of our biggest bogey sides, which they always seem to be. And how do you think, David says, you would have done on today's pitches? Because they are extraordinary compared to what you had to play on.
I think I would have. I hope I would have excelled on those pitches. I mean, you're halfway or 3/4 of the way through the season, they don't look as though they've been played on, do they? We only played on pitches like that until mid-September, I would say, until the goal mouths became bare and the patches in the centre circle and all that, and then through the winter, where you were lucky if you saw any green. So I think myself and other players, Don would have been absolutely sensational on those pitches.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a different time though. I mean, we have to move with the times, I suppose. But it's good to look back.
Yeah, you might remember, of course, that George Best game against Northampton when he got all those goals in the FA Cup, and you just wonder you wonder what when he had to go around their keeper and plough out of the mud. You wonder what.
I was going to say, the pitch wasn't great, was it? I remember watching that.
Yeah, you would have wondered what he would have done on a pitch like they get nowadays. Incredible. So, you had a reputation of FA Cup goals as well, didn't you? You did rather well in the FA Cup.
Yeah, I think so. Even today, I think it's a very much disrespected tournament. In our day, I thought it was one of the big highlights of the season. Who are we getting in the FA Cup when the big boys come in? Are we going to get a useless draw when you go, oh no, we've got another team in our division? Or are you going to get somebody from a higher division? So absolutely loved the FA Cup and still do to this day.
Well, I'm looking at your record, 13 goals in 6 seasons in the FA Cup, 7 in 5 games in the cup run of 76-77. And top scorer, of course, in the town in your final year at the town which meant Luton came in for you. But that is an extraordinary goal scoring record, isn't it, in the FA Cup? So what was it about that made you get all those goals?
I don't know, to be honest. It was just, I mean, the team, we kind of, when we knew we were playing the likes of Fulham, for example, or West Ham, or you know, a team from a higher division, it gave you a little, this is so much different to the run-of-the-mill league games. And I don't know. I mean, the chances must have come my way, and I managed to stick them away. I don't know. I know it's a very good record. And by the way, when I got, was it 7 goals in so many
7
games?
in 5 games in the cup run of 76?
I didn't know, but I was the highest FA goal scorer in the country that year. And it was a quiz. It was a quiz question, and I didn't know the answer.
Brilliant.
Very true.
That's really good. I've got another question from Andrew about you being, how can I put this politely, dismissed by Jack Taylor against Crystal Palace. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Peter Taylor. Yes. What happened there then?
It was a little, what they call now, and I don't think you can say it anymore, can you, on live chat? But it was a kind of a little trip from me. I got a little bit annoyed because I think he'd taken the ball off me and was running away from me. So I basically tripped him up. Nothing would have happened in those days for that other than a free kick. But he came back to me and started pushing, and I was pushing him back. And it was like nothing, absolutely nothing. I don't know if he got sent off as well.
I think we both got sent off, yeah.
Yeah, it was nothing. It was no punches thrown. It was a little bit of pushing and argy-bargy, but nothing, not that I can remember. And I've spoken to Peter in previous years, and every time I see him, I says, yeah, you got me sent off and all that. We just laugh about it because nothing really happened. And I was very surprised because in those days you could get away with lots.
I was going to say, nowadays, you might be sent off for it, but you know, incredible really that you got sent off for that in those days.
It was nothing.
Yeah. By Jack Taylor, of all people,
Jack Taylor. Yeah, who was a great referee, by the way.
Yeah. Right, more. Andy says 7 goals, 76, 77, the highest total by any player that season, which you just addressed. So obviously, your form at Swindon brings the attention of a couple of clubs, I think. Luton it was who finally got you for a 6-figure sum. What was it made you decide to go to Luton? David Pleat, the manager at the time?
Yeah, he was a young manager. There was talk of me going to Stoke City, but they didn't. I think they only offered £80,000, and the board said, no, if you're going anywhere, you're going to Luton, because they offered £110,000, I think.
Yes.
So I spoke to David, and he was rebuilding the team. He was only, I think, 32 himself, David. So he was a young man, and he wanted his identity in the team, not a team inherited, if you know what I mean. So he was signing loads of new players. And when I made my debut for Luton on the first game of the season, there were 7 new players in that team. So he was signing young players from Mel Donaghy from Ireland and Brian Steen from non-league and myself from a 3rd division club, and gradually building his own team. So it sounded quite exciting. And the season didn't go that great, to be honest. We started really well and then we faded, and in the end we were in a bit of a relegation battle, but we got out of it, and then we really kicked on.
You got it was quite a decent debut, wasn't it, for you, for Luton?
I got 2 goals. We won 6-1 against Oldham Athletic, but we were 1-0 down at half time.
Wow, 6 goals in the second half.
Because the fans were saying, you know, here we go again. We're 1-0 down at half time. Same old. And then it was 6-1, yeah.
Wow, amazing.
And it could have been double figures.
Brilliant. I was just talking about the fans. There was that comment there. Do you remember Alan Loddington shouting out from the Shrivenham Road? How much did you hear from the fans?
You could hear it. Playing on the wing, you could hear it. I used to go drifting. I could hear Danny Williams shouting at me. So I used to go over on the other wing.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And he would say to me at half time, I know what you're doing. You're clearing off out the way.
Well, I was intrigued about Danny Williams because, you know, he had the most momentous thing in Swindon's history to beat Arsenal in a League Cup final like that and get promotion in the same year. You've mentioned he was a pure football man, wasn't he? I mean, it always seems to me that, if you look at the great managers in the past, he is one of them, isn't he? And I know he's not a first division manager, didn't walk over league trophies and things like that, but what a character, what a manager.
He was a great character. I mean, he went to Sheffield Wednesday, and he wasn't very successful there. And he came back to Swindon, but he was a funny man. Make no bones about that. He was off the field and without the pressures of matches, he was actually hilarious. And we'd have great times, and the team spirit was very, very good. But he knew his football and simple, basic stuff, and he liked attacking players. He liked attacking football. And I think, although we didn't have great success, I think you'll notice that we scored quite a few goals, maybe conceded too many, is why we didn't have the success that we should have done with the squad of players that we had. Maybe the way we played, we were a little bit too open. I don't know, but I got on really well with Danny. I loved him. And he liked me, but we had our moments, as you do with a manager. We had our little run-ins, but it was all forgotten.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? How that season sticks in my head. It was just great to watch it, and as a supporter, that's what you want. You want to see your team play decent football and have a go, which is, I think, what you can say. And Ian sent that team in, which I reeled off, and says, "What a team!" And it was. I mean, why it's so great, I can't explain to you, but for me as a fan, I loved it. So thank you. Fulham 3, Swindon 3, Craven Cottage. Dave scored, was voted man of the match. You mentioned Fulham. How about that?
I remember the replay. I can remember scoring at Craven Cottage 3. I think we were 3-1 up as well. And again, our defensive frailties, they pulled it back to 3-3. But I think Rodney Marsh, George Best, and Bobby Moore played. So all things considered, we thought it's a good result. We can bring them back to the county ground and maybe get a result. And it turned out more than maybe.
Yes, 5-0. Incredible performance. I remember George Best hitting the bar from some considerable way out, but 5-0 against Fulham with those players in. What was that like?
Well, we were unstoppable. Dave Sirott, Trevor Anderson, they couldn't stop us. And even some of their experienced players were like, at the end of the game, wow, what have we just witnessed? It was great. The pitch was heavy, and wet. It may have suited us because we had players, like I say, like Trevor Anderson, myself, that could skip over the challenges and stuff. So everything went right on the night.
Yeah,
maybe if Bestie had scored and not hit the crossbar, it could have been different.
Yeah. Paul says those 2 Fulham games are 2 of the most memorable I've been at. So again, from that era, people remember them. So at Luton, you mentioned relegation, nearly happened but didn't. Yeah. And then you mount a challenge for the championship and you make your way up. I mean, those were great times at Kenilworth Road, weren't they?
Yeah, fantastic. First season was, like I say, a bit tough. Then he brought a couple of more experienced players in that gave the team a little bit of something else. I think we finished 4th or 5th. And the following season, again, we finished 4th, I think, and just missed out on 2 seasons. Nowadays, that would have been playoffs. But in those days, it was automatic promotion. So when we finally achieved it, we probably felt we'd earned our place and we were ready for it. So that was a great few years. I loved it. And David was along the lines of Danny, a little bit more of a hands-on coach than Danny. Liked to be on the training pitch, coaching players and getting the team shape and everything. So really worked on the attacking side of our game at Luton, which paid off because we had some fabulous players.
How would you compare the 2 clubs? They've always seemed sort of similar to me in terms of size, history. Is that fair? Is that a fair comparison?
Well, I think that's very fair, yeah. The only reason I would have left to go to Luton was because they were in a higher division with ambitions of getting into the first division. I would say potentially, I may be wrong, but Swindon quite possibly could be a bigger club. think they've got a great fan base, a smashing stadium. I mean, Luton are hoping to go to a new stadium in 2 years' time, but Kenilworth Road, I think, capacity of 10,000 something, 10,500. The county ground, when it's full, is a fantastic atmosphere. I would say similar clubs.
Yeah. Kenilworth Road's a bit run down, I think it's fair to say these days, isn't it? And those who've been in away end will know what I mean. So they need a new ground, don't they?
They need a new ground. It's seen better days, but also there is a lot of history in that ground as well, you know. And some people, I mean, I'll miss it when it goes, but you have to move on, move with the time. If they want to go anywhere, they've got to change and move to a new stadium.
One of the first plastic pitches, of course. Well, you say plastic, it was like concrete, I guess. Not quite like.
That was the year I left. I didn't play on it.
Yeah, I think you were quite lucky, weren't you? In terms.
Yeah, I wouldn't have played on that.
No. So over 200 appearances for Luton, 88 goals, fabulous career, and then I guess Ricky Hill, who was a teammate of yours, is a coach at Tampa Bay Rowdies. In the MSL, gives you a call, you go over to the States, and this was at a time when soccer was a big thing in the States, wasn't it? So how was that playing at the Rowdies?
Well, Ricky wasn't the coach at the time. The coach at the time when I went there was a gentleman called Gordon Jago, who was manager of Millwall and Queen's Park Rangers.
Oh yes, yeah.
And Keith Peacock, who was a legend of a player and coach at Charlton Athletic. He was his assistant. So they were the reason I went there. I know Gordon had tried to sign, well, he told me when I went to Tampa, he tried to sign me for QPR when he was manager there, and I was still at Swindon. So he said, I'd like you to come over and play a season in Tampa. So I had to think about it seriously for about 10 seconds, and then off I went.
What sort of players were playing there at the time? Because, the likes of George Best, of Pele, people like that, Johan Cruyff, incredible people, Beckenbauer, they all went across the Atlantic, didn't they? Yeah. So what sort of players were there at the time?
Well, in my team, there was a mix of European players. John Gorman, ex-Swindon manager, John was there.
Yeah.
In fact, me and him had a good relationship. He played left back and I played left wing, and similar to what myself and John had, good understanding. He was a good overlapping player. So Frank Worthington, centre forward, brilliant player, Frank. Kevin Keelan, a goalkeeper from Norwich City.
Yeah.
And then a mix of South American, but there's some good South American boys, 2 or 3 South African players. And you had to have so many American-born players on the team roster, or the squad, the roster it was called. So it was a good mix actually. And on our day we were a very good team.
What were the pitches like? Because they were artificial, a lot of those, weren't they, in the States?
Yeah, it was a mix. Yeah. Some of the pitches you played in baseball stadiums, and they were a bit strange because you had a big sandy diamond in one corner, but possibly, or they had to turn the pitch around slightly to make it all grass, and a lot of them were artificial. Yeah, but it was a good experience. Again, I loved it. Nice place to live for a few months.
Yeah, great. I mean, I was
going to say my kids weren't very old at the time, so they had a wonderful 4 months out there in Florida.
I would imagine they did. I worked with the late great Ken Furphy for a while here in Devon. Yeah. He, of course, went over there to the States, New York Cosmos, places like that. A fabulous experience, wasn't it?
He stayed there for ages, didn't he, Ken Furphy?
Yeah.
He may have been managing somewhere when I was over there. Not sure.
Yeah, great man. Right, Justin says, hi Dave, best winger at Swindon for me. Mark says, Dave Moss, my favourite player. Used to drive past our house to the ground in his cream Austin Morris, if memory serves me well.
Morris 1300.
There you go. So even your car.
Absolutely right.
Brilliant. So let's move on to your coaching career, because you've had a fabulous playing career. As we've mentioned, you go to that place called the Manor Ground. I think it was Mark Lawrenson first. Is that right? And then Brian Horton.
Brian was Mark's assistant at the time, and he offered me a role as youth and reserve team coach. So I'd just done my coaching badges, so I was delighted to get there. And like I say, they were in the championship. So I went there, and it was good. And then I'd not been there long, and Mark decided to resign, and Brian got the job as manager, and he asked me to go as his assistant, basically, a step up from doing the reserves.
Yeah.
So I loved it.
We should say, of course, you did return to the county ground briefly in that 85-86 season, if I remember rightly.
End of 85, I left. Yeah, 85-86, yeah.
Yeah, the championship season. But I think, sadly, injury meant that you didn't play very often, did you?
No, I was shattered by then. I'd had an Achilles tendon injury for about 18 months that would flare up now and then. But when I was at Luton, we tended to manage it okay. You know, I would have treatment, or I would train lightly and then join in with the team maybe Wednesday, Thursday, Friday or something. And we managed it, but it flared up quite early in my return to Swindon, and I ended up having an operation on it. So I had the operation on the Achilles tendon, which made it not painful, but didn't leave it as flexible as I would have liked. So it was a problem.
Yeah.
And of course, Lou's famous fitness training didn't really help me.
No.
But I wanted to come back, but it didn't work out. I'm sad it didn't work out, but there you go.
Well, there was great excitement when you did come back. And Claire says, unfortunately, I was only born in 73, but did see you when you returned in 85. Great times. Andrew's just sent me a text to say Ken Furphy was manager at Washington when you were at Tampa Bay. Yeah. So So at that place, the Manor Ground, then Brian Horton is your manager. He then goes to Manchester City. I mean, now to manage Manchester City. Wow, it's the keys to the kingdom, as it were. Slightly different in those days, I guess, was it?
He was headhunted by Man City. They'd finished the previous season quite poorly. Peter Reid was the manager, and they started the new season, I think, with 1 point from the first 4 games, and a lot of unrest with the supporters and everything. And somebody had noticed how well Brian had done under the circumstances at Oxford, when, I shouldn't mention it, I know, but when they went did go bust, when Mr. Maxwell passed away. We managed to keep them in the second division championship, as it is now. And how we managed it, I'll never know. We were sort of 7 points adrift at one stage, and we had to sell Paul Simpson and players like that straight away to get some money in to pay the players. But we still managed to survive. And I think a few people, noticed what Brian was doing there, and he asked me to go with him, and I kind of thought about it, and then I thought, go and work in the Premier League. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, incredible. And actually, I was saying to you before we started that one of his first games was at the county ground, wasn't it? A Tuesday night, if I remember rightly. Nicky Somerby put the town ahead. Nicky, of course, who then went on to play for Man City, like his dad did. But unfortunately, fortunately for you, because you're on the touchline, City came back and won 3-1. Yeah,
I remember it well. We stayed in the De Vere Hotel over in West Swindon, I think. We went on the morning of the game. We found some kind of grassy area with a metal goalpost. This is Manchester City in the Premier League, and we went through some passing drills and set pieces with the players on that pitch, and the ball was bobbling all over the place, and I could see, the players looking, what the heck are we doing, blah blah blah. But they went out and performed. I think Fitzroy Simpson played for us that night, played for City, and played very well. So it was Brian's first game. I'm sure it was his first away game. I'm not sure if it was his first one. whether we'd had a home game. Anyway, yeah, 3-1, and I do remember it well.
I guess you would have watched the cup tie with City with great interest last season.
I did watch it, yeah.
What did you think? I mean, we're a different era for Man City now, of course. We're a different planet, really. But what did you think of that one? Swindon's performance, first and foremost.
I was a bit surprised that they tried to out-football Manchester City. And I think it was the first goal came by the goalkeeper trying to play out, I think.
It was a second, I think, if I remember
Second
rightly.
goal, one of them, trying to play out, lose the ball to players of that quality in front of your own goal, and you're gonna concede. So I thought, and don't get me wrong, I thought Ben Garner did a great job. He got to the playoffs and played some good football and dominated possession against teams in that division. But you're not going to dominate possession against Man City.
No,
I would have chosen another way to go.
You don't say to Gabriel Jesus, he will have the ball from, stick it in the net, do you? Really? It's a bit,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Man City, you've also been manager at Macclesfield Town. How was that?
Yeah, I loved it. I wanted to be a manager in my own right and had the opportunity. They were 5 points adrift at the bottom of League Two at Christmas and staring relegation in the face. No money, basically skint. And we were playing my first game. I got offered the job, and the chairman said, "Can you keep us up, David?" And I said, "Not with that team, I can't." And he went, "Oh." I said, "But I'll make some calls and get some loan players in." So I got 3 loan players in quickly, and we went on a 10-game unbeaten run, if I remember rightly, and got ourselves out of the bottom 2 up to 4 or 5 from the bottom. So got off to a great start, and then it leveled off a little bit. But my very first game, believe it or not, was Forest Green Rovers in the FA Cup at home.
Right.
And they were in the non-league, the conference, as it was, and we just about scrambled a 2-2 draw at home. And Ricky Lambert scored both goals. Now, I put Ricky in the team. He was, believe it or not, he was a part-time player playing in the reserves on a non-contract basis. And after my first week, the chairman said to me, "How's it gone?" And I said, "Well, your best player is part-time and he's not in your team. He's in the reserves." "Oh, who's that?" I said, "Ricky Lambert." So I'm putting him in the team on Saturday. And we played Forest Green. He scored 2 cracking goals. We were lucky to get a draw, really, to be honest. And we went down to Forest Green on the Tuesday. And we managed to win on penalties. I think it was either 11-10 or 12-11 on penalties.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was both goalkeepers took a penalty. And luckily, the way it went, my first penalty taker, who was the regular penalty taker, it came round to his turn again to win the game for us. So I was quite confident. And then when we got in the changing room, the chairman said, "Oh, we needed that." He said, "Did you know we were going into administration had we lost?"
Wow.
I said, "Well, thanks for telling me, Chairman."
That's pressure, isn't it? Incredible.
That's pressure. Do you know what, Vic? I loved every minute of it.
Yeah.
Seriously.
You must be delighted they're on their way back because they had a real renaissance, haven't they, Macclesfield?
Yeah, good to see. I mean, they're always fighting above their level, really, as a club, because of the gates we used to get was like 1,800 people. There's not a massive support base there, but we always sort of punched above our weight and did really well. So sad to see them go, but yeah, they're on their way back, hopefully.
Cracking social club there. When you go to watch a game, always very welcoming.
Yeah.
In a social club, things like that. Were you still at Man City on the return fixture in the Premier League? Daylight robbery for us there. You remember that one? Were you there still?
Yeah. 2-1?
Sounds about right. I haven't got the facts and figures in front of me, but it sounds about right. No, I'll find it though. Hang on.
I think we were very, we might have been very fortunate.
So, what was your time at Man City like? Well, I fumble around trying to find out those details. What was your time at Manchester City like?
It was
Because
2 years I really enjoyed it. You're working in the Premier League, which is the other than international football, it's the pinnacle. But it was volatile times with the fans.
now, was this a time when the Francis Lee takeover was happening? Was that around about then?
Yeah, it was the time. Peter Swales was the chairman,
Yes. Yeah.
and there was a real anti-Swales actions going on from the fans, demonstrations, and it was quite a toxic place at the time. The home games in particular, and I think it did affect the players a little bit as well, to be honest. And then
Yeah.
Francis came in on a white Charger, and he was going to change everything, but it didn't really materialise. He said we should be finishing in the top 8. We knew we weren't anywhere near ready to finish in the top 8, but he insisted that if we didn't, then we would be leaving at the end of the season. So that's what happened.
Yeah, it was 2-1. Jan Arge Fjortoft scored for Swindon. So
Yeah.
there we are. Yeah.
Scored a very good goal. I don't know who scored for City. I think Carl Griffiths may have got a goal. We signed him from Shrewsbury. But I remember the game we were fortunate to win.
Well, that's good to hear. Always good to hear. What was your proudest memory or moment as a player, would you say? Claire asks.
Proudest moment. I think, in all honesty, kicking my first ball on my debut, on my full debut, and almost with my first kick. It may not have been the first, could have been one of half a dozen, but I made a goal for Peter Noble.
Oh, wow.
With a cross against Watford.
Yeah.
And that set me up there a little bit.
I'm not surprised.
Confidence went up. And other than that, obviously, hat tricks spring to mind. I scored 2 for Swindon, scored 1 for Luton as well. So those are always, and the Fulham game is also the Fulham game and the replay, proudest moments. And then promotion with Luton into the First Division when we beat Shrewsbury 4-1 at home to clinch the championship.
It's quite a thing to reel off wonderful things like that. But I was reading an article yesterday. Fjortoft had a perfectly good goal chalked off, apparently, in that Man City game. I can't remember it, but do you remember that? Fjortoft? No. Okay, fair enough. But I was reading an article about you the other day, and one of your biggest regrets was a bottle green velvet suit. What was that? Can you remember that? What was that about?
That was horrendous. I think it was just in the days when the velvet jackets were quite trendy. If there ever was a day when velvet jackets were trendy, with the big wide lapels, and you had a white open neck shirt with collar out there. I thought I was like, one of the Persuaders or something.
So why is the obvious question there?
Well, if you ask me now, would you wear a bottle green velvet jacket? The answer would be definitely no. If you ask me 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the answer still would have been no. So what possessed me, I have no idea.
Fair enough. Okay.
Unless it was cheap.
We'll must try and find a picture. Are there pictures of you in it?
I hope not.
Wonderful. Go on.
As I say, knowing my daughter, she might have one somewhere.
Fabulous. Well, we all wore stuff in the 70s that we regret, don't we?
Yeah.
Actually, some of us do, still do, quite frankly. Right. We had a question earlier on, and then you eventually get to Liverpool, which is, been at Man City, which is now a huge, gigantic club. Then you get to Liverpool as Liverpool Academy Chief Scout. Now, I'm going to mention, there was somebody who said earlier on, what players played in the first team for Liverpool? Well, can I throw the name Raheem Sterling at you?
Yeah.
And what would you say about that?
Well, the scouting nowadays, even when I started 15 years ago at Liverpool, it's different than it was in the old days where, one scout went out with a flat cap and a notebook and spotted a player playing on the village green, for example. There's a lot more science involved nowadays. Raheem was a player at QPR Academy, spotted by all the clubs in the country, including Liverpool, obviously. We'd seen him play. He played for England under 15s, under 16s. So all the clubs knew about him, and it was a matter of getting the deal done or not getting it done. And our director of the academy at the time, Frank McParland, was very brave. And he, at the time, what it cost us was quite expensive. And I remember another scout said to me a few months later, "You've paid over the odds for Sterling, haven't you?" And I said, "I haven't got a clue. Time will tell." And of course, time did tell, because Raheem ended up moving to Man City for 49 million quid. So
he's on his way to Chelsea as well, isn't he?
And I was with my ex-boss last week for a coffee, talking about it actually, and he said it wasn't ridiculously expensive. It was expensive for a young player at the time, but he said nowadays it's a tenth of what people are paying for young players. So it paid off. My point was, Vic, that the scouting is different. There's a lot of people involved. I would see the player. Somebody else might see the player and contact me and say, "You want to see this kid? I recommend him." And then we would go, and then someone else would go. And we'd build up a dossier of reports, attributes, weaknesses, etc. A bit about his character that we could find if we knew anything about his character, his home life, his background. So there's a lot goes into it rather than just seeing some talent on a football pitch.
What was it about him? Anne says, "I like the sound of the bottle green velvet suit."
I'll try and find it, Teller, from the wardrobe.
Marvelous. What was it about him? I mean, because he's had a stellar career. Let's be honest. He's gone to. I don't know if he's gone to Chelsea or he's going to Chelsea. One of the two, isn't he? He's on the way of moving. What was it about him as a young kid?
First thing that catches your eye with Raheem when he's 15, speed, agility. I mean, dynamite. His pace was frightening, over 10, 15 yards, but could dribble. He liked to take people on. It was exciting to watch. He didn't want to just get the ball and play safe and do this. He wanted to attack defenders. And that was the first thing that caught our attention, really, how positive he was when he picked the ball up. And I think he's gone on to prove that, yes, he still does that, but he's also developed his brain a little bit where he knows the right and the wrong times to do it. So all credit to Man City. They've obviously developed him. And I think Chelsea have got a damn good player on their hands.
Yeah. What about his development as a character? I mean, he's now not just a footballer, but there's a lot to his social side as well in terms of what he says about social justice, things like that. Does that surprise you, or did you spot that in him as well?
No, I think that surprised us, but he's 27 now. He's matured, hasn't he? He's had some stick himself over the years through social media and stuff like that, which a lot of it unfair, or most of it unfair. But he was a good character. Although people said, "Oh, he's quiet, he's a bit surly, the way he looks at you and the way he speaks to you." And I remember coming back from Anfield with him. I drove him to Anfield to meet Rafa Benitez when he was like 15. And I was having a chat, and I said, "Are you all right, Raheem?" Because he was very quiet. And he said, "Yeah, look, I don't need all this sales pitch. I want to sign for Liverpool. I don't need, let my agent deal with all that." He said, "I just want to play football. I just want to get out on the training pitch and train and play." And I thought, so I said to Frank, my boss, I said, "This is what he said to me." He said, "Fantastic." He said, "We'll get it done. We'll get it over the line." And that's what they did. So I thought that was like a bit of an eye-opener. He wasn't interested in the money at the time. He wasn't interested in people showing him, PowerPoints of, "This is how we train, this is the training facility, this is that and the other." He just said, "Look, I'm going to sign for Liverpool. I just want to get on with it. I don't want all this sideshow that's going on."
Yeah. What a player he's been. Incredible.
Yeah, he's had a great career so far.
Extraordinary. Paul says, plenty of flares on show when you came to Dave Syrett's wedding with Jimmy Allen and Steve Hazelwood. Do you remember that?
Oh, absolutely. Flares. Did I have my green jacket on at the time, though?
Well, I don't know, but if you got a picture, Paul, send it. We'd love to see it. Dave Syrett, of course.
Or not. Thank you.
Yeah, very sadly missed Dave Syrett. What a wonderful bloke. And
lovely guy.
Miss him terribly.
Smashing player as well, Dave.
Yeah. I got to know him really well in the later stages of his life, and what a genuine person. So yeah. This from Andy, great stories from Mossy, real delight. Has he written an autobiography? If not, he should.
I'm actually in preparation.
Are you? Oh,
yeah,
brilliant.
I have been for a couple of years now, and I keep having brain freezes. But I went, believe it or not, that's funny you should say that. Last week I did a lot of work on the laptop, finding out the history from 69 onwards. So yes, I've done loads of preparation. When I was on flights during my scouting days for Liverpool, I was always in Europe and sometimes South America and that. So I was on a lot of flights, and I used to, once I was settled, I used to make notes and on all backs of boarding cards and stuff like that. I had all this rubbish written down. I'm trying now to collate it all and get it all into some sort of purpose and into some order.
Oh,
yeah, so I'm on the way.
Yeah, a title could obviously include something about the Rolling Stones. Are you a fan of the Rolling Stones?
Yeah, I love the Rolling Stones.
There you go. Have you seen?
But I won't, because I think that's a bit too corny and a bit too obvious.
Right.
Because of my surname, and I've got a great title, and I'm not telling anybody.
Okay.
And I told my daughter, who's big into her writing, and she said to me, "Perfect. It sums you up."
But the words "gathering" won't be in there at all.
Gathering won't be in there.
Fair enough. Did you go and see the Stones at Anfield? Because they were on there recently, I think, weren't they?
No, I didn't know. No, I was probably working somewhere.
So, what is your connection with Jurgen Klopp's team at the moment? What are you actually up to at the moment?
Nothing. I've retired.
Right. So you've finished with that. But
yeah,
if you know of any young strikers, perhaps Egyptian ones, who might fancy a month or two at Swindon.
But if he doesn't deliver when now he's signed his big new contract,
with
Liverpool, I'll make a call to somebody.
Yeah,
and say get him down to the West Country, or get him to Oxford.
Oh, don't do that. Whatever you do.
Only kidding.
Well, it'd be fantastic. I guess, though, there must be players at Liverpool in the academy who would relish a season at somewhere like Swindon, would they? People like that?
Well, they loan a lot of young players out. Yeah. And I will be scouting I can't say who at the moment, but I will be scouting next season for somebody on a part-time basis.
Okay.
And watching a lot of academy football. So when I'm watching 18s and 23s, I will, if I see anybody I think would do, I will let somebody know, because there are some very good kids out there who need that experience of playing proper first team football.
Would you do a book signing at the county ground? Is a question from Claire.
If I write a book,
well, yeah, obviously, if you have the book, yeah. But would you come down to the club shop and do
or just come down and sign books?
But people would love to see you back.
Of course I would. Yeah, of course I would.
Yeah, brilliant.
I've got to get it published, Vic. I've got to get it published first.
Oh, people would snap your hands off, I'm sure. City versus Town from Malcolm. 2-1, Kevin Horlock own goal and David Rocastle.
Oh, Rocky, yeah. I remember the goal.
Yeah, another one gone too soon, of course, David Rocastle.
Fantastic goal. A drag back as the defender came in, dragged it with the sole of his foot, sold the defender, I don't know who it was, and then whipped it into the net. I can remember it now.
Yeah,
I said Carl Griffiths, didn't I? But Carl actually crossed the ball. He crossed it for him.
He was an amazing player, David Rocastle, wasn't he? He was just one of the greats, really, at Arsenal, and then obviously at City as well. Just a wonderful player to watch.
Lovely lad as well.
Yeah, great.
Lovely. You wouldn't know he was played for England and was a bit of a superstar. He had no airs and graces about him. Lovely kid.
Yeah, great shame that he went too soon too. Steve Avelwood, who we mentioned, of course, sadly no longer with us. So a lot of those great players from that era we've lost. Dave, it's been an absolute joy. Thank you so much. We're going to let you get on and enjoy your evening from now on. But I tell you what, we could be on here for 3 or 4 hours.
My pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. It's been my pleasure.
Well, Chris and I were talking about getting starstruck a couple of weeks ago of, various people. And I have to say, I do get starstruck when I'm talking to people like you, because that era, I love it. I just love it. And it just to me was a pure pleasure watching Swindon play in those days. So thank you for then.
Fantastic.
Thank you for now.
Yeah, it's been brilliant. Thank you very, very much, David. And
Thank
as I
you,
said, at the beginning, I'll collate all the there's a lot of comments and everything, so I'll collate them and send them off by email to you, so you can see them. So, but thank you very much. It's been a joy. So, okay, thank you very much, everybody. We may be back this week. Please keep an eye on social media. We may have a special coming up, but nothing's confirmed at the moment. But keep your eye out, and we may well be back. If not, we'll definitely be back next Monday. We don't know who it's going to be yet, but we have got a couple of people that lined up. So
maybe David Moss will come back and do another one, because Paul says top man Mossy enjoyed that.
I'm already planning my book signing.
Fabulous.
Oh, fantastic. So thank you very much, everybody. And we will see you either later on this week or definitely next Monday. Thank you.